The Wisdom of Ben Sira, which is also known by its Greek title, the Book of Sirach, or by its Latin name, Ecclesiasticus. Whatever you call the book, it's a collection of proverbs and wisdom poetry by a renowned Jewish sage named Yeshua Ben Sira. He lived in Jerusalem near the beginning of the 2nd century BC, and at his own school, he trained young Jewish men for political and religious leadership in Israel. Ben Sira studied the Hebrew scriptures from his youth, so his words and his teachings are saturated with biblical language and themes. But he also labored to develop his own insights, so that through his teachings, the wisdom of the ancient scriptures could be passed on in a new way to the next generation. Ben Sira wrote his book in Hebrew, and while it was not included in the oldest form of the Hebrew Bible, it was highly regarded by many Jewish communities after it was written. Ben Sira's grandson translated the book into Greek around 130 BC, and it was this translation that later became popular among many early Christian communities. This is why it was eventually included in the Deuterocanon of Roman Catholic and Orthodox traditions, while later Jewish and Protestant communities didn't recognize it as part of their Bible. Throughout Ben Sira's teaching, he persuades his young Jewish students to remain faithful to Israel's God in a world that was increasingly hostile to their way of life. Ben Sira restates the main themes of Proverbs. To truly honor God, one must live by wisdom and by the fear of the Lord. But he makes extra clear that this means living by Israel's covenant laws found in the Torah. There was great pressure from the surrounding Greek culture to abandon their unique way of life, and Ben Sira insists that wisdom and Torah are the only way to true honor before God and other people. Ben Sira organized this large collection of his teaching into sections by the placement of 3 long poems that are interconnected by common themes taken up from the book of Proverbs. And these poems surround 2 large blocks of wisdom teaching. The opening poem calls the reader to live by God's wisdom, adopting the motto from Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." For Ben Sira, fear refers to a deep sense of reverence and a healthy trepidation before God that reminds me of my small place in the universe. It's a moral mindset that submits to God's wisdom and gives up the right to define right and wrong for myself, even when it's difficult or inconvenient. The poem goes on to develop an image from Proverbs chapter 8. God's own wisdom that created and sustains the cosmos is portrayed like an elegant woman who can be pursued and embraced only by those who fear the Lord. Those who find and live by this wisdom will be showered with her abundance and honor. This is Ben Sira's way of showing that being faithful to Israel's God is living in tune with the cosmic order of creation. But what does a life of divine wisdom really look like? In chapters 2 to 23, Ben Sira has collected dozens of proverbs and wise sayings about a variety of topics: anger and forgiveness, lending money and gift-giving, sex and marriage, how to behave at public banquets, how to choose your friends, how to cultivate virtuous character traits like generosity and patience and self-control. Among all these proverbs, you'll find 3 poems that recall the opening poem about pursuing Lady Wisdom. For Ben Sira, every part of life, however ordinary, is to be transformed by pursuing wisdom and the fear of the Lord. At the very center of the book is a remarkable poem about divine Lady Wisdom and the Torah. It's inspired by Proverbs chapter 8, but with a twist. We learn that God's wisdom permeates the universe because by it, God orders and sustains all things. But this wisdom cannot be found just anywhere. God's chosen that his wisdom would come to dwell among one specific people, the Israelites. He depicts Lady Wisdom as God's glory that came to take up residence in Israel's tabernacle and later the Jerusalem temple. Ben Sira makes this connection because it's already there in the Hebrew Bible. In the stories about the tabernacle and the temple's construction, God's Spirit fills the craftsman with God's wisdom to build a place for God's glory to dwell. But Ben Sira goes further. Because the temple was a symbolic Garden of Eden, he describes God's glorious wisdom in the temple as a new tree of life and like the river of life, offering wisdom and blessing to God's people. Then Ben Sira bundles all of these images together. God's glory and wisdom and the tree and river of life can all be found in the Torah of Moses. The Torah is where people hear God's own words and wisdom, where they can enter into God's glorious presence and find true life. This remarkable poem shows how Ben Sira read the scriptures as a unified network of stories and patterns, making one overall point. The way to true life is by living in covenant relationship with God and living by his wisdom. After this comes another collection of wisdom teaching with dozens more proverbs about all kinds of topics, and the reader should be aware. The influence of Ben Sira's social location and his prejudice is pretty clear in this section. He was a wealthy, upper-class man who viewed slaves and women as inferior. This comes out in his offensive comments about women, especially ones that he does not like, and about the low value of daughters. He's expressing a patriarchal value system that was widespread in his day. But his words stand in contrast to the more positive, honorable portraits of women found throughout the Hebrew Bible and in the stories about Jesus and in the rest of the New Testament. The climactic finish to Ben Sira's work is a long poem honoring Israel's faithful ancestors. It's a celebration of the most famous, faithful characters in the Hebrew Bible. Abraham and Moses, Aaron, Joshua, Caleb, Samuel, David, and so on. He praises each one for their loyalty to Israel's God and to the Torah of Moses. Ben Sira holds them up as examples of the character traits he's been promoting in the book, and the last praiseworthy figure in this poem is not from the biblical past, but from Ben Sira's present. Simon, son of Onias, who was the high priest of the Jerusalem temple. He describes Simon as the ultimate man of wisdom who enters the temple to offer sacrifices and represent the people before God, requesting God's mercy and blessing upon Israel. After this, Ben Sira concludes his book with a prayer and a poem of wisdom. He first prays to thank God for delivering him from trouble in the past, and this gives him the confidence to praise God for the deliverance of Israel he'll perform in the future. Then the book concludes with a final poem about pursuing Lady Wisdom. Ben Sira talks about how he embraced God's wisdom and lived by the fear of the Lord, and then experienced a life of blessing. These two poems go together, and they make Ben Sira's final offer to his students. The future well-being of Israel and of each one of his disciples will only come by a life submitted to God's wisdom. The book of Ben Sira offers us a unique window into the life of an ancient biblical scholar. He shows us how educated Israelites read and understood their scriptures in the period of the Bible's final formation. He also shows us what mattered to these early readers of the Bible. Ben Sira saw people forgetting God's wisdom found in the scriptures, and he cared most about passing on to the next generation the values of God's wisdom and living in the fear of the Lord, but restated in a new way for his time and place. And that's what the wisdom of Ben Sira is all about.